Hmm. Amazing. Okay, so Red Wings and Predators are tied at 1 after one period of play. The Red Wings outshoot the Nashville Predators 9-8. Robbie Fabry tied the game from Anthony Matha at 1925. Pacers lead the Pistons 40-36 with around 5:36 to go. Yeah, 5:26 to go, rather. Forty to 38. DeLon Wright, Josh Jackson kind of bust into the right baseline near the post, kicks it out. Jeremy Grant, left corner three bomb, and that's good. And the Pistons take the lead 41-40 with just under over 4.5 to go in the second quarter at Little Caesars Arena. Pistons just 2 of 13 from behind the 3-point line now. McDermott puts the Pacers back up by 2 with a 3-bomb of his own. Jackson fakes 3-bomb off the rim too long. Jeremy Lamb with it. And a Sabonis basket does not count, but a foul before the shot. That's why it does not count. Pacers now lead 43-41. Sabonis to the free throw line. Makes the first free throw. It's now 44-41 Indiana Pacers. Gotta tell Ed the really good news. (45-41). Sabonis hits them both. Pacers still with the basketball. Pistons might have had it last. So 3. Taylor Phillips here with the guys. Pistons took the lead 46-45, and now the Pacers take back the lead 47-46. Blake Griffin with it, being double teamed. Dish inside to DeLon Wright, and he puts the Pistons back up on top 48-47 with a floater. Now a high glasser the other end. No. Goes out of bounds to the Pistons. All right, Ed will join us. (50-47 Pistons. 124 left, second quarter. Oh, Ed comes in first. Oh, yeah. Got him. Gonna reconnect to audio, brother. All right. Hey, Ed. Hey, Ed, you're muted. Ed, you're still muted. There's Frank.
Hey, Taylor.
Hey, Ed, you're still muted. Oh, there we go.
Good. Are we loud and clear?
Yep.
I got you, Ed.
Wonderful.
All right. So, yeah, the Tigers just signed yet another outfielder, Nomar Mazara. That's another good. That's going to be that's also going to be in our Viget What's Your Grade segment. So, all that being said, let's get to it. Let's go to work.
Let's rock and roll.
Let's do it.
Yep. And welcome to another episode of the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast on Stables Media. Taylor Phillips and Ed Smith and Frank Vashner here with you. My opening statement, the Tigers just keep on loading that roster. Ed, what is your opening statement? Then we'll go to Frank.
My opening statement is seeing what a fellow Michigan alumni did in terms of reestablishing his status as the GOAT gives me optimism as to what Matthew Stafford could do as begins his new stage of his career next year.
Frank, your opening statement.
And my opening statement will be based off of the Super Bowl that I witnessed on Sunday. It wasn't just Tom Brady becoming the GOAT and entering his own stratosphere. He also had a lot of help from a phenomenal defense as well that had held Patrick Mahomes to no touchdowns. All in all, defense wins championships.
Yeah, offense gets you points, but defense wins championships. And the Buccaneers defense was incredible. Not to step out of our Michigan sports format, but wow, it was amazing. I thought it was going to be a high scoring tilt by both teams. But anyway, follow me on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at DT2Phillips with 2 L's. Follow Ed Smith on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at EdSmith313. And follow Frank Vashner on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at Frank_Vashner. Before we get started, we want to remind everyone to download the all-new social sports mobile app, VigIt. Enter the referral code STABLES for Stables Media when you sign up. Available on the Apple App Store and Google Play. Download the VigIt app and sign up with the referral code STABLES. Michigan users can pre-register with its partner BetMGM and make a minimum deposit of $10 in exchange for 2,000 Vig coins. Take advantage of this opportunity, Michiganders. Right now, the Red Wings just got underway in the second period, tied at 1. Robbie Fabry from Matha and Hronek in 1925. They lost to the Tampa Bay Lightning 3-1 to get swept, but they dominated the Florida Panthers 4-1, kind of. Thomas Greiss got his first win as a Red Wing, and then they lost to the Florida Panthers 2 nights later, 2-1. They're playing the Nashville Predators right now, as I mentioned before, at Bridgestone Arena. Going into this meeting, the Red Wings have won 6 straight at Bridgestone Arena, but it's tied at 1 right now. This game could go either way, but sluggish start by the Red Wings the first period until that Fabry goal. But they play the Predators again at Bridgestone Arena Saturday at 8. Then they're home against the Chicago Blackhawks Monday at 7:30 and Wednesday at 7:30 on NBCSN. The Monday game is on FSD. Ed, we'll go to you, and then we'll go to Frank. Ed, just the same old story, but finally got that Thomas Greiss win out of the way, at least.
Yes, it was. And not only was it his first win as a Detroit Red Wing, it also marked the first win by a Red Wings goaltender that was not named Jonathan Bernier. And Frank, we touched upon this upon either a week or two or so ago about the last time the Red Wings had won with a goaltender that wasn't Jonathan Bernier. It was, of course, the recently retired Jimmy Howard way back in 2019. So we're talking about a 2-year almost stretch of that not occurring. So that speaks to a lot of things. Obviously, it speaks to the state of the franchise itself, where you don't have enough quality goaltending or a quality goalkeeper to have you in enough games to where you could possibly steal 1 or 2 victories here or there. And 2, it also speaks to how the rest of the roster was put together by Ken Holland in his final days, and how Steve Eisman has a lot of his work cut out for him in terms of a true rebuild in a sense for the team. But as the saying goes, the tank rolls on. It is nice to see other guys other than your young 3 of Mantha, Bertuzzi, and Larkin get involved. It was nice to see Fabry get a goal in tonight. Hope he continues that, keeps up the pace in that regard. But you're still seeing the offense being stagnant. Like, this is the past 2 or 3 games in a row where they've only managed to tack on only 1 goal, if anything. Now, again, they did get an early head start, but how long can they keep that up? How long can they sustain that throughout the course of 60 minutes and possibly overtime? It remains to be seen for tonight, but it goes to show, of how uh, not so much efficient, but rather the adverse effect it has been for the Red Wings, not just the offense, but as a unit as a whole. Because as good as Thomas Greiss has been, as well as Bernier to an extent, it's you can't really rely on your 2 goaltenders to be standing on their head all game long for an extended period of time, game after game. It's just not a long-term winning strategy. So eventually, that has to be addressed of putting the right guys in the right spots, making upgrades in certain key positions, and not relying so much, on your 3 young core pieces to where, yes, they're your future, but you also want to get good supporting help whenever you can from guys like Fabry, guys like Filppula, and so on and so forth, for however long you have them under contract until you get that next piece to be that next helping guide. So it's just, as the beat goes on, it goes on here.
Right. And more importantly than that, they need a coach, a real NHL coach that can put a team together. And Jeff Blashill's not even nearly it. And we've touched this more than 10 times.
Yeah, it's
broaching. Jeff Blashill just needs to go. He cannot coach anybody.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. And I can't say how many times I've stressed that on here. But as for recent games, I think we also have to give mention to Giovanni Smith for the game he had on Sunday. He ended up with the old Gordie Howe hat trick, a goal assist, and got in a fight as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think this is somebody who I know that Jeff Moss's panned as a bust, and everyone's like, okay, well, this guy's not going to amount to anything. It was a reach by Ken Holland, and I mean, I'll give credit where it's due that Smith has shown this as, hey, you know what, I can play. Hey, I know I'm not going to be a superstar, but I'm going to be the role player. I'm going to go out there, do my job. I'm going to work hard, and I've been pleased with what I've seen out of him in limited action. I prefer that he be in the lineup a lot more over somebody like Franz Nielsen, who is on his last legs. But that's another topic for another time. And also guys like Robbie Fabry, who had a goal tonight. Right, he's got to keep chipping in goals. And Thomas Greiss, who I know everyone says, well, he hasn't won any games well. I think that's more so the fact that in all the other times he's played, he got no goal support, which I kind of look at like run support for a starting pitcher. I mean, he was giving up like maybe 2, 3 goals, but the Wings were only scoring 1. So you couldn't really pin all the losses on him, but it was nice to see him finally get off the schneid, get a win, and see if he can keep it going and play strong in net, which is something that the Red Wings need, because I believe Jonathan Bernier has been out for a while. I do not know when he is returning, because otherwise you're going to be stuck with somebody like Calvin Pickard, who is a gas can in net.
Yeah. So the Red Wings could just continue their season. Yeah. That's pretty much all there is to talk about in terms of the Red Wings. The Pistons, they lost to the Phoenix Suns 109-92. They gave the Lakers a fight, another one, 135 to 129 in double overtime, a loss at Staples Center. Then they beat the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets, 122 to 111. That this is another elite team that the Pistons have beaten. Ed, as we start with you and then we go to Frank. Pistons and Pacers are at halftime. I think the Pistons have a 53-52 lead. Otherwise, it's tied at 52. One of the two. But anyway, the Pistons have beaten quite a few elite teams, Ed. Got to give them props despite what their losing record says.
Correct. It's like a funny thing to notice upon how teams that are not quite as good as such as the Lakers or the Celtics or the Suns or even the Nets, they have a hard time struggling with teams that are not those. But yet, when it's time to suit up and get ready for those teams, the Pistons are acting like a completely different animal. You're seeing Blake Griffin more involved. Like for example, I like the alley oop that Mason Plumlee had the other night against Brooklyn. He chipped in with a double double to go along with Jeremy Grant's 32. Now it goes without saying in terms to the Brooklyn win, it does come with a couple of caveats. Number one, no Kevin Durant, who's still following COVID protocols. And number two, it also goes without saying that ever since the acquisition of James Harden in that massive blockbuster trade, the Nets, as a whole, in terms of their defense, has suffered. It has gone down drastically. While they're currently on pace to be one of, if not the most offensively efficient teams of all time, their defense is quite currently projected to be the complete reverse, the worst of all time, if it goes at this rate. And we saw it on multiple occasions. Blake Griffin backing down James Harden with relative ease in the paint. Players on Brooklyn not being aware of who's making a cut, not looking out for Mason Plumlee on the back end, or making weak attempts whenever a Jeremy Grant or somebody else was making penetration into the paint. It speaks, it's not a surprise when Steve Nash, who was, even though he made his best play under Mike D'Antoni's 7 seconds or less offense, it didn't really stress defense, unfortunately. And you're seeing that pay dividends for good and for bad here in terms of Brooklyn's case. Now, I understand because of the top heavy that you are for Brooklyn, how many people are picking them to get to the East and possibly win the finals. But as we saw this past Sunday in the Super Bowl, defense still matters when it comes to winning championships. And if they are so fortunate as to even make it out of the East with the way their defense is currently playing, they'll be lucky to get a game out of the Lakers. I'll just say that. Now back to the Pistons. It is very nice to see Jeremy Grant continuing to be their best performing player. I am not aware currently. Well, even if he was not able to make the All-Star game, he should anyway. By the way, he's been playing on this team. Blake Griffin has been more involved as of late. He hasn't looked quite that shell of himself that I saw earlier in the season. So that's good for Blake's case. And with the other young guys that we see involved here, like Sekou Doumbouya, Killian Hayes before he got hurt, and now what we're going to be seeing incoming with Dennis Smith in regards to the Derrick Rose trade. We'll touch on that briefly in a moment. It is promising to see some of these young players get in minutes, but also be as competitive as you possibly can. We haven't seen too many instances like we saw last week against Utah, where they looked like absolute crap in the first half. Blake Griffin getting upset, ripping off his jersey. We haven't seen that type of downtrodden look on this team where, they've gotten close. Yeah, they've lost a game or two, but they've been competitive. They've shown more fight in this regard as compared to what we've seen in a few recent games. Now, I don't know if that's a testament to Dwayne Casey talking to him. It could be that. It also could be the fact that these are veteran players that probably had a little bit of meeting amongst themselves. Like, hey, we got to get this crap together. No, we're not the best team in the East or league, whatever. But we got to show more effort, and that's what we're seeing. Yes, they're still losing, and that really speaks to how eventually, if you're going on a rebuild, you're going to have to lose some games here and there to get yourself in a better position to draft better players. Now, between that and also the trades that they've made, I thought it was a good win for Troy Weaver to get what he needed to get out of Derrick Rose. While I preferred he'd gone to a team in better contention, like say even the Clippers, compared to the Knicks, I understand why. Eventually, in the end, the Knicks wanted him because Tom Thibodeau, Derrick Rose's old head coach, going back all the way back to when he first started his career in Chicago, he's now coaching the Knicks. He wants his guy, and he got his guy. So, hats off to Derrick. I thank him for his time here in Detroit. I wish him best of luck as he goes back to New York. And I welcome Dennis Smith Jr., a guy who I personally always wanted to see play for the Pistons, even going back to draft night. When I saw some of his tape coming out of college and his explosiveness, the way he attacked the rim, his attitude, the way he carried himself, it reminded me in a way of Russell Westbrook in a sense in terms of will and determination, the kind of player with that mentality that you want on your team. And in terms of his mentality, he recently said that he wanted to put himself through the G League so he could earn his way back to a roster spot. And I think that type of mentality needs to be commended. And I think it'll be well appreciated on a team such as this, and especially in a city such as this as well. So farewell, D Rose. Welcome, DSJ.
Yep. And we're going to get to that right now with our Viget What's Your Grade segment. The Pistons have, like Ed mentioned, traded Derrick Rose to the New York Knicks for point guard Dennis Smith Jr. and a 2021 second round draft pick, according to Sham Sharania. Ed, we'll start with you again, and then we'll go over to Frank this time. Ed, what is your grade on that Derrick Rose trade?
My grade is a B. Not only the fact that, to me, you got a good player in return in DSJ, you also got an asset in terms of a second round draft pick. I think the Knicks would have been absolute fools and suckers if they decided to give you a first. So I think the next best thing was to get a second round. You're getting one this year. I believe it was one that they had acquired from Charlotte. So thank you, Michael Jordan. So we'll be at least getting an extra draft pick that could use to either get us a player or a potential asset to be used in a trade down the line. But in terms of getting Derrick Rose in a better spot, because while the Knicks aren't that contending team, they have been doing better so far this year than in years past. Derrick is on a better team on paper, and I'm really looking forward to see what Dennis Smith Jr. brings to the table. So all in all, I give this one a solid B.
All right. Ed gives it a B. Frank, now it's your turn. What is your grade on the Rose trade?
Well, my Viget, what's your grade for the Derrick Rose trade is going to be the same as Ed. It's a B. I mean, you got somebody like Dennis Smith Jr., who was really good when he was with the Dallas Mavericks. He comes to New York, and it's kind of more of a mixed bag there. So I think a change of scenery will help him, and it's going to be interesting to see how well they utilize him and DeLon Wright at the point guard position. Because I know DeLon Wright has played well at times, but he's more of a backup. And as for Derrick Rose going to the Knicks, I mean, you guys know my view on the Knicks as a whole in terms of an organization, how I feel about James Dolan as an owner, but that's neither here nor there. I think he is going to a much better spot because the Knicks are somewhat better of a team this year. I mean, he's reunited with Tom Thibodeau, who he was with in Chicago, and I believe he was also with him in Minnesota as well, and he's with the Timberwolves, if I'm not mistaken. So he's got a chance to maybe kind of rekindle some of that old magic he had in those days. And getting a second round pick too definitely sweetens the deal. You can use that in the draft or use it to make another trade down the line, kind of like what Ed said. So it's a B for me.
All right. We'll all give it a B then. So that's one half of the Viget What's Your Grade segment, brought to you by the Viget Sports mobile app for sports fans. Download the app on the Apple App Store or Google Play and sign up with the referral code STABLES for Stables Media. Capital S at the beginning, lowercase letter B in the middle. Now to college basketball. The Michigan State Spartans have won 2 straight. 66-56 over a very bad Nebraska Cornhuskers team at home. And then they just barely edged the Penn State Nittany Lions 60-58. Yes, those are 2 straight wins, but I just don't think the MSU Spartans are up to the challenge when they play the Iowa Hawkeyes at home Saturday at 2:30 on Fox, and then they play Purdue again, this time in West Lafayette, Tuesday at 7 on one of the ESPN channels. Ed, we'll go to you, and then we'll go to Frank. Ed, what are your thoughts on the Spartans winning 2 straight against easy teams?
My thoughts, even though it's against 2 rather lackluster teams, a win is still a win. You don't apologize for it. And frankly, MSU needed those wins the way that they've been playing as of late. Josh Langford helped out in one of those affairs, but the real shining jewel throughout both of these games I noticed was Aaron Henry with his offensive contributions, playmaking abilities, all of other assets of the game. He was the best player on the floor, in my view, for both of those wins for MSU. And they're going to need that type of continuous effort on a consistent basis for the remainder of the season if they want to have a shot of even sniffing the tournament. So that's one thing. And I got to say, until the Izzo himself says or lets in an inkling of how things may be starting to slow down or be done itself, I'm never going to be reporting on the demise of the Michigan State basketball program, especially not when you consider the fact that Imani Bates is on the way. I think he's going to be there for a year. He's going to make that team far better than what it is now. And he may very well have them in Final Four contention, but when all's said and done. Now, I understand that's a lot of heap, a lot of praise, hype, hyperbole, however you want to call it. But let's listen. I just saw this kid play the other day. It was in a Fox Sports basketball showcase. It was him against Mikey Williams. Their teams facing against one each other. I think Bates was coming off an injury or something of that nature. He came off the bench. He didn't start the game. He hit his first 3 shots like it was nothing. There's a reason why they're calling this kid the next Kevin Durant, with his body type, the way his jump shot, his offensive skill, ability. There's a reason why he's getting that so much praise. So more so to the fact that if he were to say, fingers crossed, be drafted by the Pistons, it would be akin to LeBron James being drafted to the Cleveland Cavaliers back in 2003. That is my belief. That's believed to a lot of people. And that shows to let you know what kind of a get and pickup that Izzo and MSU got. And while, this season is going to be practically a wash when all said and done, once they get Imani, and it will be soon, I think you're going to see a completely different team in East Lansing. That's for certain.
Yeah, absolutely, indeed. Frank, your turn.
Well, I will admit fully, as a Michigan State fan, I was happy to see the Spartans get 2 wins, even though it was against Nebraska, who's the worst team in the conference by far. The Penn State win, I'm a little bit more impressed by, because even though Penn State's record isn't that good, they were actually 28 in the net rankings, which goes a long way toward determining whether or not you make the NCAA tournament. And, that's a quality win for them. Get a quadrant 1 win, you definitely boost your resume. And as for the actual play, I mean, look, I know I have bagged on Foster Loyer at point guard, but I'll give the man a lot of credit. He is the most consistent option running the point, because AJ Hallgard not still having his moments as a freshman. And so you need that consistency, even though he's not going to be somebody like what Cassius Winston was. And I mean, as for other players too, I mean, Ed mentioned Aaron Henry. He having some strong games. That's the Aaron Henry that needs to play from here on out for Michigan State if they have any hopes of making tournament. I still don't have them because the road is really tough. They still got to play Iowa again, which I think is a winnable game because Iowa is awful defensively. Not as bad as the Brooklyn Nets, but still they're not very good. Illinois is going to be a tough matchup as well with Ayu Dosunmu, who I believe is starting to unseat Luka Garza as the best player in the conference. Plus, you got to play Ohio State again, and you got to go to West Lafayette to play Purdue, which Michigan State always seems to struggle there. And whenever Michigan gets cleared to return to action, still got to play them at least once, maybe twice. I'm not sure if both those games will get played or not. Only time will tell. So this is probably going to be the hardest road that Michigan State, when they've been on the NCAA tournament bubble, has ever had to go through. But, if they get it, then it's just another mark in the win column for Tom Izzo for getting his guys to buy in, to put up or shut up and find a way to get the job done. So,
Yeah, definitely. We'll see how they fare against those Iowa Hawkeyes. Again, Saturday at 2:30 on Fox, and then at Purdue Tuesday at 7 on one of the ESPN channels. Like I mentioned before, they'll be interesting. Those 2 games will be interesting to see. considering the Spartans have won 2 straight, even against sluggish teams. Like Ed mentioned, a win is a win. Now, for the Wolverines, they had their game, which is scheduled for tonight against the Illinois Fighting Illini at home at Chrysler Center, postponed. I believe that was the only game, as far as I'm concerned, that was postponed. But since then, there has been no word on any further postponements. Ed, we'll go to you, and then we'll go to Frank. I think one of our, it's going to be on one of our 5 questions, but I could see the Wolverines returning to action pretty much soon.
Hopefully so. And let's take into consideration the fact that this was not the team's call. This wasn't even the call of the athletic department. This was more so of the school itself following orders, or not orders, but following, I would say, recommendations from the state, specifically the Department of Health and Human Services, especially with news of apparently new variants of the coronavirus showing up, not just in the United States, but also in the state of Michigan, particularly in Wayne County and Washtenaw County, where U of M is located in Ann Arbor. So I understood the hesitation, despite, whether or not it was a popular or quote unquote right thing to do, especially in the middle of a season. But the safety and health should be priority for everyone first. That should be the main priority first. So that I had no problem with that regard being followed. And it seems as long as we don't have any outbreaks pop up between now and the next couple of days, we will in fact see the team resume action. And despite this hiatus, it's more than likely, there's more than expected for them to be in the Big Ten tournament next month, which coincidentally, as was recently announced, is going to be moving from the United Center in Chicago to Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. So isn't it kind of funny, of all things, that the Michigan basketball team will get a chance to play for the conference championship in Indianapolis before the football team ever does? Once again, Juwan Howard is showing Jim Harbaugh how you friggin' do it.
Yes, he is. Frank, your turn.
Well, to kind of pony off what Ed said, I would assume that Harbaugh should be taking notes on Juwan Howard, even though they are coaching different sports, but at least to show how it's done. But all that aside, I mean, yeah, you do hope Michigan is able to get back on the hardwood soon. I mean, I know this new COVID variant that's popped up in Washtenaw and Wayne counties. I haven't heard how much it's spread, so I'll take the no news is good news in terms of that. But Ed, this is a question I have for you. Let's say that this whole shutdown did not happen. Do you think that Michigan probably could have had a couple of losses sprinkled in here and there? I'm not saying they would have completely fallen flat, but usually you see this happen with basketball teams. Once you get into the grind of late January into February, you start losing some games. I mean, you might have a bad day here and there, but I mean, it doesn't give you any reason to panic. And, I happen to think if they do get back, whoever their first game is against, I don't know who it could be, but if it's against somebody who is kind of in the upper echelon of the conference, say maybe like Illinois or possibly even an Ohio State or somebody like that they could possibly lose a game like that?
That is a good question, Frank. And I would say it was quite possible, given the fact that one of the games that was recently postponed as well on this extended hiatus was against Illinois. And it would have been a potential head-to-head matchup of two teams ranked, I believe, in the top 10 or specifically in the top 6, with Michigan at number 3 and the Fighting Illini number 6. There have been some back and forth chatter between both fan bases online about, oh, your team's scared to face this and da. When you realize this is not the team's call, once again, they're out of their freaking hands, people. I'm sure a majority of those players, if they wanted to, they'd be playing right doggone now if they wanted to. So I understand the frustration on that part, but again, it's just nothing they could do here. But back on to Frank's point with your question, yes, it is quite possible because upon this stretch of the season where you get into the back end of the conference schedule, trying to get yourselves ready and set up for tournament time, you're going to run into a wall here or there. You may have a flat performance, like we saw against Minnesota. It was quite possible when you consider the fact that teams now have tape on you. They know what your strengths are, what your weaknesses, how they can exploit. And with Illinois playing at the level they have been, I was expecting this hypothetical game to be a tough matchup for the Wolverines. If it was a loss, it wouldn't surprise me if it was. It just comes down to what they've been able to A, take care of the ball, and B, have with their three best players in Dickinson, Wagner, and Livers. If any of three of those players had an off night, or all three were ineffective in some way, shape, or form, I could see that as a possible recipe for having a bad night. But again, we don't know that for certain because we haven't been able to get the chance to see them play, unfortunately. And while it is a frustration on the part of players, I think they should take this as a blessing as disguise because you're getting an opportunity to get more rest, while also getting a chance, if you're able to, get some more film in, practice whenever you can, and keep in touch with your coaches so that way when you do get the chance, you don't come out flat, you don't come out looking rusty, because I guarantee you rust is going to be a factor whenever they do play again, in terms of how they start out and how they look out throughout the course of a game, so that the more they get those reps in, those get those quarters in, get those halves in, they'll be fine-tuned when it's time to start a tournament, whether it be Big Ten tournament or in the Big Dance itself. So to me, it's the sooner they can play, the better.
Good
Well,
point.
also, I would like to add, I think, Ed, you also want to hope that that Michigan didn't end up peaking in January, because I mean, how many times have we seen that where you see a team that is rolling off a ton of wins and they're unbeaten, or only have one loss like to January or February, and then they just seemingly fall off a cliff in late February into March, and that's not the time where you want to fall flat. You want to be peaking more into February and into March and getting ready at the time the tournament rolls around. So when it's time, it's win or go home time, you're ready to roll, and you're rolling, and you're the team that nobody wants to play.
That's a fair point. And I think also, though, we saw that happen in terms for Michigan's benefit. Let's not forget the 2013 team that went to the Final Four. They got a couple games to showcase on national television, where to be against Michigan State or Ohio State. Came up big, late in clutch moments, Trey Burke specifically. And then what we saw in the past couple of years, or late in John Beilein's tenure, in terms of getting hot right at the right moment. Who could forget, of course, the almost plane crash that could have happened right before the Big Ten tournament? Then they used that as motivation to help spur them on to winning the damn tournament. And then, of course, what was it, 2018 or 2018 or 19 with the next run, the latest run to the Final Four.
2018.
Thank you, Frank. They looked good heading in at near the tail end of that season as well. And of course,
that was under John Beilein too, right?
Yes, yes, that was one of Beilein's last few seasons under Michigan. But it speaks to how, to Frank's point of how, you want to be on a roll as much as you can, because again, I keep going back to what we saw what Tampa Bay did. Let's take into consideration the fact that after they lost to Kansas City in the regular season that Sunday after Thanksgiving, they didn't lose a single game the rest of the year, both regular season and playoffs. They ripped off an 8-0, 9-0 stretch. Granted, most of that came due to the fact that their defense played exceptionally well. But when your team as a whole is on one accord, and you got to give Tom Brady credit for that as well, it speaks to how momentum can really help carry you forward from game to game, week to week, or even month to month. And Michigan, I think it will be a benefit for them to get on some type of momentum rolling as we head towards the tournament. Because again, with the stop, start, it can fluctuate your rhythm, knock you off course potentially, and have you coming out looking either lethargic or rusty or just completely jumbled up. So again, they want to get some type of playing time, get some reps in, and also get these matchups out the way because you want to see how you match up, how you stack up against the best of the best, not just in your own conference, which has been an absolute bloodbath this year, but against also the rest of the field and all the other conferences in the NCAA.
Definitely. So, speaking of Michigan, we transitioned to some football. Former Michigan Wolverine Charles Woodson and Lions wide receiver Calvin Johnson are both elected to the 2021 National Football Hall of Fame, class of 2021. And speaking of Calvin Johnson, he has been trying to reconcile with the team. Ed, we'll start with you and then we'll go to Frank. Ed, what's been going on? What do you think has been going on between Megatron and the Lions?
Well, there have been reports recently that maybe it was due to the fact that this was impending, all likelihood that Calvin was going to get this Hall of Fame induction, this acceptance, that more than likely, the time will be better now more than ever to repair that fractured relationship between the Ford family and Calvin specifically. There is precedence, of course. We saw for years the bad blood that Barry Sanders had with the franchise after going over how he left the team, how he retired, and so on and so forth. Eventually, that water went under the bridge, and now you're seeing Barry as an integral part of the team, of the organization now than what he was before he even retired. And that goes to the saying of how time can heal all wounds. And I think this could be another situation of, hey, some time has passed now. Calvin is retired. He is enjoying life away from the game with his family, starting up his new businesses, being as safe as he possibly can, especially in the midst of this pandemic, to the point where, listen, his accomplishments on the field speak for himself. In my view, he was, in terms of pure athletic, raw talent and ability, even though it was a short career compared to others, to me, he should be right up there in terms of consideration with the likes of Jerry Rice and Randy Moss in terms of greatest of all time wide receivers, because it wasn't Calvin's fault that he was drafted into this situation and into this team. I guarantee you, if you were to put Calvin on those 49ers teams or on those Cowboys teams with Michael Irvin, or even on that 98 team that Randy Moss was in with the Vikings, with Chris Carter and Randall Cunningham and the like. If you take the Calvin Johnson from, say, 2009 onward to the end of his career and stick him on any one of those teams in that era, I guarantee you will be seeing just as much a solid production from those players, if not better, because of talent, of, again, the ability, but also the size, the freakish athletic specimen that Calvin was. And the fact that when you consider the teams had to game plan solely around him, when you see guys have to put double team him on the goal line as if you're covering a guy on a punt return, that alone speaks to the impact you had on the game and speaks to your impact as a football player in general, and that you deserve to be a Hall of Famer. Now, as for Calvin, I hope, again, there have been some talks between him and Sheila Ford. Calvin has commented on it as well. So it speaks, again, to how, A, time can heal all wounds, and B, I think there's some realization by the Ford family by saying, hey, things did not end as well as we would have wanted it to. Let's see if we can try to repair it as much as possible. I don't know if it comes down to repaying back him his money or the bonus that he was forced to give back or whatever the case may be. But given how they were able to treat Matthew Stafford's last days here with dignity and respect and as amicable as possible, I think they saw that and recognized, hey, we need to get things done with Calvin, and we need to do it right here and now, because you can't let time pass by the way you did with Barry. So I appreciate that end. As for Charles Woodson, let's not forget about for Chuck, for what he did, his contributions to the game going back to college. Okay. I believe he was the first ever, and to this day, the only ever pure defensive player to win the Heisman Trophy.
You are correct about that, Ed.
Yes, thank you, Frank. And also, not just what he did on the defensive side of football, but what you saw was able to contribute on offense and on special teams. You know, basically doing in the pros what Deion Sanders was doing on a weekly basis in the NFL. You saw, and of course, he was the MVP on a team that went on to go undefeated and win a national championship. So that speaks to his contributions and his effect and how valuable he was to that team. And he proved it even more a step further in the NFL. Let's not forget, before he had his accolades on the Packers, let's talk about the time he had with the Raiders. He was an All-Pro and multiple times NFL All-Pro, as well as I believe he won Defensive Player of the Year once or twice. In 2001, it was him who had gotten the sack on Tom Brady that would have been and probably should have been ruled a fumble. Of course, that was the infamous Tuck Rule moment, the Tuck Rule game, the snowball, however you want to call it in New England, depending if you're a Patriots fan or a Raiders fan. But it was Charles Woodson himself who made that play happen. And unfortunately, he wouldn't get another chance to be competing for a championship until later on in his career, to where, again, he had a second act, if you will, with the Packers. And it culminated in him getting to Super Bowl 45. Now, unfortunately, he didn't finish the game, but it speaks to me, his will as a player, that he, on the play that he injured himself on, that took him out of the game, he gave it his all in terms of trying to commit a pass breakup. It worked, but at a price. But it speaks to the type of player that Charles Woodson was, his impact on the game, and this is as much a deserved a Hall of Fame induction as I have ever seen for any player. Chuck, you deserve it. You're one of the best ever. Congratulations to you and to Megatron.
Yeah, we all remember his one return against Ohio State. I think it was in '97.
Oh yeah, that was
Yes.
that's when he sealed the Heisman, a la the way Desmond Howard did it in '91, up and down the same sideline, I believe. And let's not also forget, quite possibly one of the two greatest pure athletic plays I've ever seen by a Michigan football player ever done in the game. The one-handed interception that he had against Michigan State, where he seemingly leapt up into the air, one hand, snatched the ball, and at the same time managed to get 1 foot on the tiptoes in bounds before the sideline, before he got out of bounds. That was quite possibly and probably still the most impressive play I've ever seen anyone do as a Michigan football player. The only play that came close to that was the one-handed interception that Jordan Lewis had against Wisconsin, and that came a mere 20 years later. So that alone speaks to the will, the impact of how transcendent Charles Woodson was as a football player and to that school and to that team. So again, well-deserved, Chuck. Well-deserved.
Yeah, there were great plays like that, but there's only one Charles Woodson. So, by the way, the Red Wings and Predators are now tied at 2 after 2. Couple of late goals, one from Duchesne and then the other from Mark Stahl. Again, second goal in his last 3 games. Wow.
Good on him. Now
Yeah.
let's see if they can actually do something and not blow it in the third period again.
Right. Exactly. And Thomas Grice on that second goal should have had that one. He got a piece of it with his right pad, but it just went by him and into the net. But Grice should have closed that right pad right on the ice, from what I can tell watching this game. So the Tigers, before we get into part 2 of the Viget What's Your Grade segment, they've re-signed second baseman Jonathan Scope to a 1-year, $4.5 million contract. And then Spencer Torkelson was invited to camp and spring training. Who knows what will happen with Torkelson in the near future. But let's go to Jonathan Scope for a second before we grade like 3 signings here. The Tigers needed Jonathan Scope. They needed a second baseman. Mm-hmm. Was he the only option out there? I mean, Jonathan Scope can pretty much hit.
He may have been, considering the fact that he was one of their lone bright spots in terms of contribution in the lineup last year. It was a bit of a small sample size because before he could even get going, he blew his knee out and had to get surgery, and he was done for the season. So, but before that, though, he was hitting a respectable 278. He had 23 RBIs and he had 8 homers, which I think was second most on the entire team. I think it speaks to of how the team valued his contributions and valued his effort in the lineup and recognized, listen, you're pretty much the best we got at second base. We're not letting you go. So we're going to be bringing you back. So I like this move. We can grade it now or grade it in the segment coming up, but it's a move I love. Now, as for Torkelson, I could see it playing out similar to what they did with Casey Mize last year, of how, they'll do the spring training or whatever. They won't let him start the season, but I could see a scenario like later in the season, if not before the All-Star break, then sometime in the second half of the season, he'll get a call up, he'll get a chance to play a couple games. He may not be part of the September call-ups, September rosters when they expand to 40. But I think he'll get some playing time in the majors before all is said and done for this season. Because let's not forget, he, along with Mize, Matt Manning, Skubal, and Shane Green, they're part of that young guns core that is going to be relied upon by this team to help build for the future. And those players that I mentioned, they're all in Keith Law's top 50 up-and-coming young prospects for this year. So to me, is that a sign of things to come? We'll see. But, you got your arms in Mize and Manning. You want to have your heir apparent to Miguel Cabrera in one way, shape, or form. And Torkelson looks to be that guy. But, you want to build him up and not rush his development too soon.
Right. Frank, your turn.
Well, I think re-signing Scope was a no-brainer because I don't think there was any better options out there at second base. I mean, as Ed mentioned, the guy hit 278 last year, 23 RBIs, 8 homers.
Kind of what I meant.
Yeah. So I mean, he was actually pretty consistent last year, and again, was one of the bright spots on the team. So I think it was pretty much a no-brainer to bring him back. And as for Torkelson, I mean, there is a part of me that does hope that he can make to the big club, because I think you need the young guys to start taking over and getting more playing time. The whole thing with him getting a call up here and there, I think it's going to lead to, it goes to the whole service time talk, which that's an area I'm not going to get into because it seems to be a little bit more politics than anything. I digress. But I mean, with him and Riley Green and also guys like Matt Manning, Casey Mize, Tariq Skubal, this is the future of the Tigers, and you're going to need guys like that to start showing what they can do, because you're going to need them pretty much every day, whether that be next year or the year after that, or who knows when it'll be. You want to see these guys hit and pitch at the major league level and at least feel good about it.
Yep. So that covers that. Now, part 2 of the Viget What's Your Grade segment, brought to you by the Viget app. Sign up with the referral code Stables for Stables Media. Tigers signed first baseman Renato Nunez from the Baltimore Orioles to a minor league deal with an invite to spring training. 26 years old. Ed, what is your grade on Renato Nunez?
I give it a C+. It's nice for them to bring in a young player, guy under 30, who gives them room for potential development. And it's at a spot of relative need. So, again, you don't want to rush Torkelson's development too soon. So, in the meantime, you get guys like Nunez, get him involved, be that placeholder, if you will, that transition, if you want to call it that, while Torkelson gets himself ready. And then once the time comes, you'll be able to place Torque in whatever spot, third string or whatever, for him to get his experience, to get his feet wet in a sense. So that way he knows what the experience is of being in the majors, the ins and outs and all on in between, as well as following and being around and learning under players such as this, especially if he's going to be taking over from guys like him and Miggy in the near future. So I think they did what they needed to do in that regard. I'll just give it a C plus.
All right, Frank, what is your grade on Renato Nunez?
I'm going to give this a C plus as well. I mean, it's probably just more of a placeholder deal, just so, like Ed said, Torkelson can at least show that he's ready when the time comes. And who knows what Nunez production will be this year. Here, I would just expect him to just do enough to be a solid majority of the day first baseman. Nothing special, but also not anything completely horrible as well.
All right. Apologies for the hesitations excessively. But anyway, the Tigers, next up, they have signed veteran second baseman Greg Garcia from the San Diego Padres to a minor league deal with an invite to spring training. Ed, we'll start with you and then we'll go to Frank. Ed, what is your grade on Greg Garcia?
Well, it's another C plus as well. I just only do it from the fact that you recognize that outfield has been one of your weak spots, so you're trying to fill up with as much depth as humanly possible, especially knowing for the fact that you may not have all of these guys available to what you want to do with them in terms of rotation, spots, lineup, whatever the case may be for the next season. Something could come up at any moment, or you may need a backup or a reserve, or a player may opt out, or he maybe have to undergo protocol for COVID or whatever the case may be. So you need a death patient, you need a body out there for break in case of emergency. So I could see a move like this as a possible reason to believe that as well. So for that, I'm going to give that an okay, solid C plus.
All right, Frank, what is your grade on Greg Garcia?
I'm giving this one a C plus as well because, like Ed mentioned, the Tigers need guys that can play in the outfield. So, I mean, Garcia will be a guy that will make a push for playing time early on, and we'll just hope that he can be a lot more productive and not be a complete gas can out there.
Right. So we both graded Renato Nunez and Greg Garcia a C plus. We all do. And then finally, they've signed former Texas Rangers slugger outfielder Nomar Mazara to a 1-year, $1.7 million contract with incentives. Ed, we'll start with you again, and then we'll go over to Frank. Ed, what is your grade on Mazara?
This one I give a little bit of a B minus because we've seen what was able to contribute before during his stay in Texas. So if we can bring just a smidgen of that production to the Tigers, I think AJ Hinch would greatly appreciate that in this lineup, as well as other guys that he could bring back, like we saw with Schoep, or Scope, excuse me, as well as other guys they could bring back, like maybe a CJ Cron if need be. But yeah, for terms of that, and like we mentioned before with the previous point of having depth in needed spots, this was an okay move to make, and it's fine. It has potential to be even better in terms of long-term outlook. So I'm gonna give this one a low B minus. So it's more comparable to the last grade, but only slightly better.
All right, Frank, what is your grade on Nomar Mazara?
I am kind of teetering on that C plus B minus grade because, I mean, while Mazara did have some productive seasons in Texas with the Rangers, when he was with the White Sox last year, he seemingly couldn't hit the broadside of the barn. I mean, as to why that's the case, maybe it's because that guaranteed rate is a much bigger ballpark than what he had in Arlington and with a short porch and left. So all that aside, I think maybe he'll be a little bit better than what he was in Chicago. And I know that when he was in Texas, he was pretty bad defensively, but once he got to Chicago, he improved defensively. So hopefully he can be as strong defensively, if not stronger, and find some of that hitting magic that he had in Texas. So I'll actually go B minus, just slightly above a C plus, with an opportunity for it to be better as the season goes on.
All right. Oh, I'll grade this a B minus as well. So that is our Viget What's Your Grade segment, brought to you by the Viget Sports mobile app. Sign up with the referral code Staples Download it on the Apple App Store or Google Play. Again, the referral code is Stables with a capital S and the letter B, lowercase, in the middle for Stables Media when you sign up. Now for the 5 questions segment. Question number 1. Will the Lions and Calvin Megatron Johnson get everything fixed? Ed, we'll start with you again, and then we'll go to Frank.
I believe they can. The fact that they've even begun to broach this subject, that they're even talking to each other, is a good sign. To me, the real question should be a matter of when, not if. But if you're going to ask me, will they get eventually fixed? Well, considering the fact that, while it took some time, they were able to patch things up with Barry, and they had as amicable a split as possible with Matthew Stafford. I do believe eventually you'll see a repair of sorts to the relationship that they had with Calvin. So, yes.
All right. Frank.
I will say yes as well. I mean, the fact that since Calvin's announced that he's being inducted into the Hall of Fame, he's had conversations with Sheila Ford Hamp about trying to get things right, getting the money that he's owed, and the organization seems to be willing to do that. And it's good on both sides that they're mending fences with each other. So at least it can be done before Calvin gets inducted this coming summer.
All right. Question number 2. Speaking of Megatron, will he actually come back for retirement? Probably not. Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Frank.
Well, I will say we saw how recently about coming out of retirement can do wonders for one team. Case in point with Rob Gronkowski. Now, I could see a similar scenario to where, let's say, Matthew Stafford placed a call to his buddy Calvin, say, hey, you want to give it one more go? Go for the jugular one last time? I could see that as a possibility. But I think at this point, Calvin has stated multiple times in interviews he doesn't miss the game. He doesn't, and who wouldn't? I wouldn't blame him. The injuries, everything that he went through, that he put his body through on top of the losing. For his sake, I hope he stays retired because he's happier now, way happier now, healthier. He's got his family with him to support him in his newest ventures as well. And he's still able to maintain and earn an honest living without having to put his body through any trauma. So while the temptation is there, that's exactly why they call it just that, temptation. So Calvin, for your sake, stay retired, buddy. Even if it was for Stafford, I would still say stay retired.
Yeah, I think so too. Frank, you'd have to agree, right?
I absolutely agree. Only I'll say there's absolutely no chance that he would come back at all because he's been out of football for, I believe it's 6 seasons now, where since he's last played. And when you're out of football for that long, there's no way you're going to be able to come back. I know people are going to point to Rob Gronkowski and what he did with the Buccaneers. Gronk was only out for 1 year.
Right.
6 years, that's different. And plus, Calvin's got a family. He's got a business to make a living so he can at least put food on his table, pay his bills. So I would say he's staying retired. And I don't think anybody, at least not that I'm aware of, has ever made a comeback after they've gotten enshrined in camp.
All right. Question number 3. When will the Michigan Wolverines men's basketball team fix their COVID issues and start playing again? Ed, we'll start with you again.
Well, I think you might have to a slight rephrase because, in terms of fixing COVID issues, nothing's going to get fixed with COVID until A, we got enough people wearing masks, B, we have enough vaccinations being rolled out, and so on and so forth. So again, the school is just simply working hand in hand with the HHS to work on, I'm hopefully a relative workable solution. And unless things pop up, they're currently scheduled to resume action 3 days from now on Valentine's Day against Wisconsin. So again, the sooner that these players get back to playing, the better. And more, as long as, of course, they follow the right protocol, they stay safe, and they don't do anything stupid. That's all you need to do. So unless something happens at the 11th hour, it looks like we will be seeing the team on Valentine's Day against the Wisconsin Badgers.
All right. Frank, pretty simple, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll agree with that. They'll be back in action on Valentine's Day when they play Wisconsin. And that is provided that nothing surfaces of them at being maskless at a party, much like North Carolina's basketball team was. So they'll be back soon, because it doesn't sound like that the team themselves that had a huge problem with COVID or this new variant. I think the whole shutdown was just more as a precaution, that so that it did not spread to them and then spread throughout the whole team like wildfire. So I would say no problems to fix. As long as they did everything they were supposed to do, they'll be good to go on Sunday.
All right. Question number 4. Are the Pistons actually better than their record shows? Right now, they are trailing the Indiana Pacers 99-80 with over 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. That is not better right there. But after seeing them being elite teams like the Nets, I thought I'd ask that question instead of that old question number 4. But anyway, Ed, what do you think?
No, if I was to answer your question, they are who we thought they were. Let's not take into consideration the fact that for some reason they always seem to give the Lakers fits. I don't know what reason why, but they do. I think in this last instance they went to double overtime. Now, granted, Anthony Davis has not been playing his usual self, so I think that's one reason why those Laker games have been close. If it was AD and LeBron being on par with LeBron, then yeah, those would have been blood losses. And with this win against the Nets, they're facing, again, A, a team without Kevin Durant, and B, a team that's currently on pace to be the worst defensive efficient team in the history of the National Basketball Association. So again, you take those wins with grain of salt as much as possible, but the record says who they are. The roster speaks for itself compared to the rest of the East. You know, and you're in the middle of, and with this new tenureship, with Ed Stefanski now handing the reins to Troy Weaver, you're seeing the rebuild begin in earnest. This is what you got to do. You got to go through the hard beginning. This is why it's considered the base, the formation. You got to have some trades, get rid of some players. You already did that with Derrick Rose. I doubt you're going to find a suitor for Blake Griffin, but we shall see. But no, their record explains who they are in perfect detail.
I'd say so. Frank?
At the end of the day, you are what your record says you are. And I know there's going to be people that point to their success against the Lakers. Well, look, like Ed said, the Lakers didn't have Anthony Davis in one of those games, and he also isn't back at full strength yet. And the win against the Brooklyn Nets, I mean, look, like we've said many times, the Brooklyn Nets are a joke defensively. And that's putting it pretty politely. And plus, Kevin Durant wasn't there as well. So, I mean, if they do get wins, you pretty much say, okay, good. At least they're not being like the Philadelphia 76ers and are intentionally trying to tank and get blown out. The fact is they just don't have the horses to consistently win in games like this. So I would say they are what their record says they are. Taylor, you're muted.
All right. Question number 5. When will Spencer Torkelson make it to the major league and play for the Tigers? Ed, we'll start with you again.
If I had to pick one, make a bet, I would say post All-Star break, early second half. That would be my prediction. And I guess you want to say sponsored by Viget? You can go right ahead and say it.
Yep. In fact, the entire 5 questions segment is brought to you by the Viget Sports mobile app. Frank, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to say that he'll make his major league debut probably by July 4th. Or if that's right before the All-Star break, I mean, it could be a little before that or maybe after, but I'm going to say before July 4th, because I think they'll probably say, we want to see what he can do, give him a couple of at-bats, get him in the field with a big club. And if he goes out and plays very well, then I think you'll see him up here a lot more. And if he stinks up the joint, then it's going to be back down to Toledo or probably to Erie or West Michigan. I forget who the AA affiliate is now.
All right. So that is our 5-question segment, like I just mentioned before, brought to you by the Viget app. Enter the referral code STABLES for Stables Media with a capital S and the lowercase letter B in the middle when you sign up. Available on the Apple App Store and Google Play. Download the Viget app and sign up with the referral code STABLES. Michigan users can pre-register with its partner BetMGM and make a minimum deposit of $10 in exchange for $2,000 Bitcoins. Take advantage of this opportunity, Michiganders. Also, check out the all-new show Hustle and Grind with Joe Madden, Lisa Diaz, and Cam Parsons every Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 Central, 7 Mountain, and 6 Pacific here on Stables Media. Gentlemen, excellent job as always. That concludes another fine episode of the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast on Stables Media. We'll be back next week, Wednesday at 11 here on Zoom and simulcasting on YouTube as well. For Ed Smith and Frank Vazner, this is Taylor Phillips signing off. Follow me on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at DT2Phillips with 2 L's. Follow Ed Smith on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at EdSmith313. And follow Frank Vazner on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at Frank_Vazner, VAGCNER. Thanks very much for listening, downloading, and sharing. And remember, the truth is out there. TTFN, Tata for now. Power to the people. Hit them with a high. We rest our case. Stay safe.